A quiet farm, a woman alone on her porch, watching the sun set over the endless fields. Then a shadow moves. At first she thinks it's just another stray dog, but as it gets closer she sees her a German shepherd, thin, desperate, her fur dirty and tangled, staggering forward with something in her mouth. It's tiny, fragile, barely moving, and when the woman realizes what it is, her heart stops. Because this mother isn't just looking for help, she's looking for her, and what happens next will leave you speechless. The sun hung low over the vast farmland, casting long shadows across the golden fields. The air was crisp, carrying the familiar scent of earth and hay. Claire Dawson sat on her front porch. Her welcome to ZF Story Life. Every story we tell is filled with emotions, lessons, and unforgettable moments. From touching animal tales to powerful life stories, get ready for content that moves your heart. Subscribe now and experience the magic of storytelling. Rocking chair creaking slightly as she sipped from a mug of lukewarm coffee. It had been a long day tending to the farm, and she welcomed the brief moment of stillness. But then she saw movement near the edge of the property. At first she thought it was just another stray wandering by. It wasn't uncommon for abandoned dogs to roam near her land, searching for food or shelter, but something was different. The figure staggered, limping slightly. CLA squinted, setting her coffee aside as the animal moved closer. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a German shepherd, thin, exhausted. Her fur was matted with dirt, her ribs faintly visible beneath her coat. But that wasn't what made CLA's heart stop. It was what the dog was carrying. A tiny, barely moving pup dangled from her jaws. Claire shot up from her chair, her boots hitting the wooden porch with a solid thud. As she stepped forward, the mother dog struggled with every step, her legs weak, her body shaking, but she kept coming, determined. Eyes locked onto CLA. CLA's heart pounded. She had worked with animals all her life, and she knew desperation when she saw it. The mother shepherd wasn't just lost, she wasn't just a stray, she was pleading. CLA slowly crouched down, keeping her movements soft and non-threatening. "Hey there, girl," she murmured, her voice gentle but laced with urgency. The German shepherd paused just a few feet away. Her ears twitched, her breathing was ragged. And then, with the last bit of strength she had left, she took one final step and collapsed. The pup tumbled from her jaws, landing limply in the dirt. CLA rushed forward, her hands trembled as she gently scooped up the tiny body. The pup was shockingly small, too small. Claire pressed her fingers to its little chest, a heartbeat faint, but there it was, alive, but barely. She looked at the mother dog, who lay panting, watching her with exhausted but pleading eyes. CLA swallowed hard. This wasn't just a stray dog, this was a mother who had fought with everything she had to save her baby, and now she had placed that life in CLA's hands. Claire moved quickly, scooping the pup into her arms and rushing toward the house. She barely made it to the porch before turning back. The mother shepherd hadn't moved. Fear shot through CLA. "No, no, no, come on, girl," she urged. Running back, she knelt beside the dog, placing a hand against her frail body. Her fur was coarse, covered in dust, her muscles tight with tension. CLA ran her fingers along her neck, her ears, her ribs, checking for wounds. There were scratches, patches of missing fur, but nothing life-threatening. But she was starving, dehydrated, completely drained. "You brought your baby to me," Claire whispered, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "You knew I'd help, didn't you?" The dog let out a weak whimper, a sound so raw, so full of trust that Claire felt her chest tighten. She had no time to waste. Carefully she lifted the mother shepherd into her arms. The dog barely reacted, her body limp against CLA's chest. "I've got you," she whispered, "both of you," with careful steps. She carried them inside, not knowing yet that this was only the beginning, because this wasn't just any stray dog, and soon CLA was going to find out why this mother had come looking for her. CLA pushed open the door to her farmhouse, with her shoulder cradling the tiny, barely breathing puppy in one arm while supporting the mother shepherd's limp body with the other. The heat from inside hit her instantly, a stark contrast to the cool evening air outside. She moved quickly, heading straight for the old couch near the fireplace. With slow, careful movements she laid the mother dog down, pulling a soft blanket over her frail body. The shepherd let out a weak sigh, her sunken eyes flickering with exhaustion, but there was no time to rest. Yet CLA's attention snapped to the tiny life in her hands. The pup was frighteningly still, its fur was damp, its breathing so shallow it was almost undetectable. CLA's heart pounded. She had helped sick animals before, but this was different. This was a newborn on the brink, and she refused to let it die. She moved swiftly, grabbing a soft towel and carefully rubbing the pup's tiny body in an attempt to stimulate circulation. "Come on, little one," she whispered. "Stay with me." The pup let out the faintest whimper. Claire exhaled sharply, relief and fear intertwining. It wasn't enough. She needed warmth. She ran to the kitchen, heating up a small towel and wrapping it gently around the fragile newborn. Then she grabbed a dropper, filling it with a mixture of warm milk and a supplement she always kept for orphaned animals. She knelt by the fireplace, cradling the tiny pup in her palm as she slowly dripped the liquid against its tiny mouth. At first nothing, her stomach twisted, then a tiny flick of a tongue, a weak trembling suck. Claire nearly sobbed. "That's it," she encouraged, tears welling in her eyes. "Keep going, baby, just a little more." Behind her a soft whimper made her turn. The mother shepherd was watching. She had barely moved, but her deep brown eyes were locked onto CLA, on her baby. The trust in her gaze was overwhelming. CLA felt a lump rise in her throat. "You brought him to me," she murmured, "because you knew he wouldn't make it on his own." The shepherd blinked slowly, her chest rising in a weak but steady breath, and then her tail moved just a slight exhausted wag. Claire's eyes stung. She reached out, brushing her fingers gently over the mother's head. "You did everything you could," she whispered. "Now let me take care of you both." Hours passed. The fire crackled softly, bathing the room in warmth. The tiny pup was finally sleeping, its breathing stronger, more stable. CLA kept it close, wrapped in a soft towel, making sure it stayed warm. The mother shepherd had fallen into a deep sleep, her body still weak but no longer as tense. For the first time since arriving, she looked at peace. Scylla leaned back in the armchair, exhaustion weighing on her, but her mind raced with questions. Who was this dog? Where had she come from? And why had she chosen CLA? As she pondered, she absent-mindedly ran her fingers through the shepherd's fur, and then she felt it, a bump, a raised scar beneath the thick fur. So his breath hitched. Her fingers traced the outline of something metallic just under the skin near the shepherd's neck. A microchip. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just a stray. This dog had a past, and Claire was about to find out exactly who she was. CLA's fingers remained frozen against the raised bump beneath the shepherd's thick fur. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. A microchip. This dog wasn't just some lost stray. She belonged to someone once, but who and why had she come here to CLA? Her mind raced. There was only one way to find out. She had to scan it carefully. CLA pulled a blanket over the sleeping mother dog, making sure she and the tiny pup were warm by the fire. She moved quickly, grabbing her jacket and stepping outside into the cool night air. The wind had picked up, rustling the old oak tree beside the house. Claire's truck was parked beside the barn. She jogged over, fumbling with the keys, and swung open the passenger door. There in the glove compartment was her portable microchip scanner. She had used it many times before for strays, rescues, lost farm dogs, But never like this, never with a dog who had brought her own pup to her doorstep, as if she had known Claire would help. Claire swallowed hard and hurried back. Inside, the shepherd was still asleep, her body rising and falling in steady weak breaths. Claire knelt beside her, the scanner trembling slightly in her hand. She hesitated. What if she belonged to someone who was looking for her? What if she had escaped from something terrible? What if CLA took a slow breath? There was only one way to get answers. She pressed the scanner to the back of the dog's neck and clicked the button. A faint beep echoed through the quiet room. A moment later, a number appeared on the screen. Claire's stomach tightened. She grabbed her phone and quickly typed the code into an online pet database. Her hands shook as she hit search. Processing. Her breath caught the then match found. A name popped up, and the second CLA saw it, her body went rigid. Her lips parted. Her chest ached because she knew this dog. She had known her for years. The name on the screen was Luna, and Luna had been her dog. The room tilted. CLA had to sit down, her knees weak. It didn't make sense. Luna had been gone for years. She had been part of Claire's life when she was just starting out on the farm, young, full of dreams, building her future. But then a terrible storm had ripped through the countryside 9 years ago. Fences had been torn apart, cattle had been lost, and Luna, she had vanished. Claire had searched for weeks. She had put up flyers, called every shelter, walked miles calling her name, but Luna had never come home until now. CLA turned back to the sleeping shepherd, her hands covering her mouth. You found me, she whispered. Luna did stir, her frail body too weak to react, but CLA knew she had come back, and she hadn't come alone. She had come with her baby. CLA swallowed back a wave of emotion. Where had Luna been all these years? What had happened to her, and why, out of all the places in the world, had she returned here suddenly? Luna let out a weak whimper. CLA rushed to her side, brushing her fingers through her old friend's fur. Luna's eyes fluttered open, her deep brown gaze locking onto Clee's for a moment. Just a brief, fleeting moment. Recognition sparked in them. Tears welled in Cilly's eyes. It's really you, she whispered. You came home. Luna let out a soft sigh, and for the first time in years her tail moved just the slightest wag. Claire's fingers lingered on the small raised bump beneath Luna's fur. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she stared at the microchip scanner in her hand. The name on the screen shouldn't have been possible, but there it was Luna, her Luna, the dog she had loved and lost nearly a decade ago. Claire inhaled sharply, her mind reeling. 9 years. Where had Luna been all this time, and why, after so long, had she found her way back? The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The warm glow illuminated Luna's thin, frail body, stretched out on the couch, her eyes barely open, her chest rising and falling. With deep, slow breaths, the tiny pup nestled beside her, its weak body curled into its mother's warmth. CLA wiped her damp palms against her jeans, struggling to process everything. She needed answers, and she knew exactly where to start. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking slightly as she dialed the number of the local vet clinic. A few rings later, a familiar voice answered. Dr. Harris speaking. Claire took a steadying breath. Dr. Harris, it's CLA. There was a slight pause, then CLA. Been a long time. What's going on? CLA's fingers tightened around the phone. I need to track down some microchip information. She said it's about a dog that's come back to me after a long time. A longer pause, then Dr. Harris spoke, his voice more serious. Come in first thing in the morning, he said. We'll see what we can find. Claire barely slept that night. She kept one eye on Luna and her pup, waking at every small sound, every shift and breathing. By dawn, she was already pulling on her boots, carefully wrapping the tiny pup in a warm towel. Luna, despite her weakness, lifted her head at the movement. CLA knelt beside her, brushing a gentle hand over her graying fur. Let's find out what happened to you, girl, she whispered, and let's make sure it never happens again. The vet clinic was quiet when CLA arrived. The receptionist barely had time to greet her before Dr. Harris himself stepped into the lobby. Come on back, he said, already motioning toward an exam room. CLA set the pup down carefully on the padded table. Luna curled up beside it. Dr. Harris pulled up a chair, rolling up his sleeves. All right, he said. Let's see what we've got. It took less than a minute. Dr. Harris typed the microchip number into the national database, his eyes scanning the screen as the information loaded. Then he frowned. CLA's heart jumped. What? She asked, leaning forward. Dr. Harris's eyes darkened. CLA, he murmured. Luna wasn't just lost. He turned the screen toward her, and when CLA saw the records, her blood ran cold because Luna had been tracked, moved, registered under different names. She hadn't just been a stray, she had been stolen. CLA's stomach tightened. Someone had her, she whispered. Dr. Harris nodded grimly. Looks like she passed through at least 2 different breeders over the years, one in the next county and another farther south. Claire's fingers curled into fists. Luna had been used, forced to have litter after litter, her entire life reduced to being a breeding machine, and when she was too old, too weak, she had escaped, and somehow she had found her way back home. CLA's vision blurred. She turned to Luna, who lay curled protectively around her pup. Even now, despite everything, she was still fighting for her baby. CLA knelt beside her, pressing her forehead against Luna. You don't have to run anymore, she whispered, her voice breaking. You're safe now. Luna let out a deep, exhausted sigh, and then, for the first time in nearly a decade, her tail wagged. Claire sat frozen, her mind racing as she stared at the cold, hard truth on the vet's computer screen. Luna had been stolen, used, sold, and now, after nearly a decade of suffering, she had escaped. But Claire knew one thing with absolute certainty: whoever had done this to Luna would never get the chance to do it again. Dr. Harris cleared his throat. Claire, I don't know who is responsible for this, but these records, they tell a story. Claire tore her eyes away from the screen. What do you mean? He exhaled, tapping the screen. This breeder here, the one listed 5 years ago, they were shut down. A full-scale investigation for animal neglect. Claire's stomach tightened. Luna survived that, she whispered. Dr. Harris nodded barely. Claire looked down at the frail German shepherd curled up on the vet's padded table. Luna's eyes were partially open, watching CLA with quiet exhaustion. And suddenly CLA saw it: the years of hardship, the weight of what she had endured. Luna had survived everything, but she had lost so much along the way. Claire swallowed hard, placing a gentle hand over Luna's paw. You're safe now, she whispered. I swear to you, no one will ever hurt you again. Luna let out a slow breath, and for the first time since arriving at the clinic, she relaxed. Dr. Harris stood, crossing his arms. What do you want to do, CLA? CLA straightened. Her voice was steady, unwavering. I want to report this, she said, and I want to find out if there are any more dogs like Luna still out there. Dr. Harris nodded approvingly. I'll pull what records I can. If you want, I can connect you with an investigator who specializes in these cases. Claire didn't even hesitate. Yes, do it. She glanced back at Luna and the tiny pup curled against her side. I owe her that much. The next few days were a whirlwind. While Luna and her pup rested in CLA's home, Claire worked tirelessly, filing reports, speaking with an investigator, tracking down whatever information she could. The case was complex, tangled in legal loopholes, but CLA wasn't backing down. She couldn't not when she looked at Luna and saw the scars, both physical and unseen. Not when she held Luna's pup and wondered how many others hadn't made it. She wouldn't let this happen again, not to Luna, not to any dog. One evening, Claire sat beside Luna on the porch, the warm hues of sunset washing over the fields. Luna's coat was starting to shine. Again, her ribs no longer as visible. She was stronger. Healing. Claire ran her fingers through Luna's fur, her voice soft. Your home, girl. Luna lifted her head, slightly pressing her nose against Cla's palm, and then she did something Cla hadn't seen in years. She let out a deep, content sigh, then rested her head in his lap. So's eyes stung. The fight wasn't over, but for now Luna could rest. She was finally home, and this time nothing would take her away again. Luna was healing slowly but surely. The first few days at the farm had been filled with quiet moments of rest. Cla had given her space, allowing her to regain her strength at her own pace, but now she was starting to come back to life. It was early morning when Cla stepped onto the porch, a mug of coffee warming her hands. She spotted Luna in the distance, walking slow, steady steps across the yard. It was the first time Cla had seen her wander that far. The past few days Luna had mostly stayed close to the porch, resting near the warmth of the house, but today she was exploring. Her ears were still slightly drooped, but her posture was stronger. Her tail, though not wagging wildly, moved faintly like a quiet acknowledgement of peace. Cla swallowed back the lump in her throat. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. A soft whimper from the porch caught Cla's attention. She turned to find Luna's pup, tiny but alert, staring at his mother from the comfort of his blanket. The little one had come dangerously close to not making it, but thanks to Cla's round the clock hair, he was finally strong enough to wiggle, stretch, and even attempt a few clumsy steps. Cla smiled softly. You want to go to her, don't you? She murmured. She carefully picked up the pup and walked across the yard where Luna had stopped near an old wooden fence, sniffing at the earth. Hey girl, Cla said softly. Luna turned, her deep brown eyes locking on to Cla's, then her gaze shifted to the pup in Cla's arms, and for the first time pure joy lit up her tired face. Cla set the pup down gently in the grass. The tiny German shepherd wobbled, his legs shaky but determined. Luna lowered her head, nose twitching as if taking in his scent all over again. Then she licked his tiny head. Claire felt her chest tighten. It was so simple, but after everything Luna had been through, this moment was nothing short of a miracle. The pup let out a tiny excited yip, and suddenly Luna's tail wagged stronger. This time Sil let out a small laugh, tears welling in her eyes. She had fought so hard to bring them back together, and now here they were safe together. As the days passed, Luna grew stronger. She started eating more. She followed Claire to the barn in the mornings, her once hesitant steps now steady and confident. The puppy, who Cla had named Scout, had become a bundle of energy, constantly exploring and playing. It was the kind of happiness Claire hadn't seen in years, not since Luna had been taken from her. And now as she watched the two of them lying together under the warm afternoon sun, Cla realized they were finally home, and nothing would take them away again. But Cla wasn't done yet. She still had one final step to take. She grabbed her phone and scrolled through her contacts, stopping at a name she had saved from her conversation with the investigator. Her fingers hovered over the call button. She took a deep breath, then she pressed it. The call connected almost immediately. Cla, the investigator's voice came through, steady and firm. I'm ready, Cla said, no hesitation. I want to tell Luna's story. A pause, then Leighton, do it, because this wasn't just about Luna anymore. This was about every dog like her, every dog that had been stolen, used, and abandoned. And if Cla could stop even one more from suffering the same fate, then Luna's fight wouldn't have been for nothing. Claire stood in the center of her farmhouse living room, the soft morning light filtering through the windows. Her phone was set up on a tripod, his camera Lens pointed directly at her. The investigator had told her the best way to spread the truth is to tell it yourself, and that's exactly what she was about to do. She took a deep breath, then pressed record. She started from the beginning, about the night Luna arrived, desperate and weak, carrying her only surviving pup, about the moment she scanned the microchip and realized that the starving, broken dog in front of her was the same loyal friend she had lost nearly a decade ago. She spoke about the horrors the records revealed, how Luna had been passed around, exploited, and used as nothing more than a machine. And then she talked about the moment everything changed, the moment Luna finally felt safe, the moment her tail wagged again, the moment she was no longer just surviving but living. Claire wiped out her eyes as she looked into the camera. "This is Luna," she whispered, stepping aside. Behind her, curled up on the couch, was Luna herself. Her coat was fuller now, her body still aged but no longer frail, her ears, though softened with time, perked slightly at the sound of his voice, and right beside her Scout lay sleeping, his tiny body pressed close to his mother's side. "Luna is home now," Claire continued, "but how many others are still out there waiting to be saved?" She ended the video with one final message: if you see something, say something. If you know something, do something. No dog deserves what Luna went through. We can stop this, but only if we try. She pressed stop and then she hit upload. The response was immediate. Within hours, Claire's video had thousands of views. Within days, it had millions. Ions. Her inbox flooded with messages, some from people who had lost their own dogs, some from rescues wanting to help, and some from people who had never known this kind of cruelty existed. But now they wanted to fight. Luna's story was changing lives, and that was just the beginning. Weeks passed, and Claire's small farmhouse became a place of healing, not just for Luna and Scout, but for others. With the help of the investigator and a growing online community, CLA helped track down other dogs who had been stolen just like Luna. Some were found, some were still out there waiting, but one thing was clear: people were finally paying attention, and Luna was no longer a forgotten victim. She was a symbol of survival, of strength, of home. One evening, as Claire sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, she felt a soft nudge against her arm. She turned to see Luna standing beside her, her deep brown eyes locked onto Claire's. There was no more fear in them, no more pain, just peace. Claire smiled, running her fingers gently through Luna's fur. "You found your way back," she whispered, "and now we're making sure no one else has to go through what you did." Luna let out a soft breath. Then, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she rested her head in CLA's lap, closing her eyes completely. The battle was over. She was home for good, and the world would never forget her story. Luna's story is one of survival, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a dog and the human who never stopped loving her. But for every Luna that finds their way home, there are countless others still waiting for their second chance. Dogs that have been stolen, dogs that have been abandoned, dogs that have been used and discarded, left to fend for themselves with no one to fight for them. But we can fight for them. If you see something, say something. If you know something, do something. Every share, every rescue, every action, it all makes a difference. Luna made it home now. Let's make sure every lost soul out there gets the same chance. If this story touched your heart, help spread the message. Share this, raise awareness, and be a voice for those who have none. And remember, no dog should ever have to find their way home alone.